Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about some of the best mid-range phones that you could buy here in 2024. So let's go ahead and jump in with the OnePlus 12R. This has been an extremely impressive phone. It's a phone that I've been using recently and it's pretty good for the price. You can get it at $500 and then you can actually trade in any phone and get $100 off too. And it's very impressive. So I really like the design on here. It's got the aluminum frame, glass back. It's IP64 waterproof and dust proof, so not quite IP68, but still the design is very nice. You have the mute vibration switch on here as well too, which I really love. The screen on here is top notch as well. It's got the LTPO4 AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus with a crazy max brightness of 4500 nits peak brightness. It's extremely bright outdoors in direct sunlight at 6.78 inches, and it is a 1264 by 2780 resolution display, so basically 1080p plus, and it's 450 for the PPI, and it's an absolute beast of a display. I really like the curved displays. I know not everyone likes it, but it does have a very premium screen on here, pretty much a flagship quality display. Now this phone is running Android 14 Oxygen OS, and it's very clean software, very fast, fluid, so I was pretty happy with the Oxygen OS experience. The cool thing about this phone is that it has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. And this phone is blazing fast. It's really fast. It can pretty much play anything you throw at it in the Play Store. It is just a beast when it comes to performance. So to get this processor at this price point brand new is pretty good, I think. So even if you're a gamer or you're doing intense stuff on your phone, editing or whatever, this phone is going to be able to keep up with it, no problem. You also have on here a under the display fingerprint sensor, which works well. The speakers on here are just okay. I wasn't really that impressed with the speakers. They just sound, okay. They don't really sound like a flagship speakers, or I've just heard better speakers from other phones, but they do sound somewhat decent. The 50 megapixel camera on here is pretty good. It's got a 50 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide, a 2 megapixel macro. The only thing it's missing is a dedicated telephoto lens. But if you can get past that, the cameras I think are still pretty good. It shoots in 4K 60, has a 16 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080 30. And overall, I was just really impressed with image quality. Even compared it to some newer phones and some older flagships, I think this phone still does a pretty decent job. So if you're just somebody who takes pictures, point and click, I think you'll be really happy with this phone. Now, the battery life is really good on this phone. It's got a really big battery at 5,500 milliamps, and then it has between 80 to 100 watt charging. The charging speeds are really fast on this phone. Now, the only thing it's missing is wireless charging, of course, so there's no wireless charging, but the battery life experience, the battery life lasts all day. It's really good, and then it charges extremely fast. All right, next is the Poco X6 Pro. This is a fantastic phone. I really love that this phone has the IR blaster. You can control the TVs and pretty much anything in your house with it. It's really cool. Now this one you can find for 350 bucks. It's got the silicone back on it, so it's technically a plastic back, but it's textured. It feels really good in the hand. It's got metal sides, so I really like the hardware on here. I think it still looks and feels really good. It also is IP54 dust and splash resistant as well too. This phone does have a 6.67 inch display. It is an AMOLED panel, HDR10 plus, 1200 nits peak brightness, and then it is a 1220 by 2712 resolution, basically 1080p plus, 446 for the PPI, completely flat panel, and it's a really good screen. Like I said, it gets fairly bright for the most part, and also the colors and everything is just really nice on here, so I had no issues with the display quality on here. This is running Android 14 with the Hyper OS, a Xiaomi skin, so you either love it or hate it. At this point I didn't have an issue with it. It was smooth, and yeah, I didn't really have too many problems with it. So the cool thing about this phone, it does have the Dimensity 8300 chipset, and this is a really good chipset. It was really fast. I was able to play PUBG at 90 frames. I was able to play pretty much anything, Call of Duty Mobile. It's a really fast phone, bouncing in and out of applications, heavy multitasking. So I was pretty impressed overall with the quality of this phone. And again, you can find this for like 350 bucks. And yeah, the cool thing about this is that you do have 256 gigabytes of storage on here, and that is the base model. And you also have 8 gigs of RAM. So I really like that. I really appreciate them putting that extra storage in there on the base model. So this phone does have stereo speakers, which sound pretty good. I was really impressed with the speakers. They do sound decent for this price point. And then, like I said, you have the infrared port, you have the under the display fingerprint sensor as well. And then this phone does have pretty good cameras. It's a 64 megapixel standard and 8 megapixel ultra wide. Has a 2 megapixel macro and it shoots in 4K 30. Has a 16 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080 60. And again, the camera specs are not going to be crazy impressive. You can see a theme here with there's no telephoto lens on these mid-range phones. And yeah, as far as like point and click, this is going to do a good job as well too. I was actually pretty impressed with how it was handling low light shots as well too. And yeah, I have no issues with the cameras. Like I said, for this price point for mid-range, it's just a standard camera and it'll take some really good photos. And what I love about these Xiaomi phones is that you get a big battery, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and they also include the charging brick at 67-watt charger, and it goes from 0 to 145 minutes. And again, there is no wireless charging, so you kind of see a theme here: no wireless charging and no IP68, IP67 dust and water resistant. Next is the Samsung Galaxy A54. Now this phone came down in price. I'm seeing them used refurbished for around $274, which I think is a really good price for this phone. It's got a plastic frame on here, and it does have a glass back, so it does not feel cheap in my opinion. It has IP67 dust and water resistant, which is really good, so I really like that. This has the Super AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus. This only gets to 1000 nits brightness, so it's not as bright as some of the other phones in direct sunlight. It's a 6.4 inch phone. It's 1080p 403 for the PPI. So this one I noticed was a little bit easier to handle than some of the other phones that are a little bit bigger. So this phone has Android 14, One UI 6, which is really nice. If you're a fan of One UI, then you'll really like the software on here. And this phone does have the Exynos 1380. So this processor, when I first got it, it was a little bit slow, but I think that was due to software. Now that this phone has gotten software updates, the phone is definitely a lot smoother and faster, and it loads stuff up a little bit faster. I wouldn't necessarily say it's anywhere near the other two phones when it comes to the processing speed and gaming, and overall just for more hardcore user, I wouldn't necessarily get this phone. Now, the cool thing about this phone is that it does have micro SD card support, so you do have expandable storage. So for you guys who download a lot of content, you'll really enjoy that this phone has SD card support. It's got 128 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM on the base model. The stereo speakers actually sound really good. I think it's the best out of the first two. And then you also have on here the optical fingerprint scanner, which works really well. Had no issues with that. And the cameras on here are pretty good. So it's a 50 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It does have a 5 megapixel macro. Again, no telephoto lens. It shoots in 4K 30 and a 32 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. I really like the image quality on here. You could definitely tell the difference here. And yeah, good color, good dynamic range. I was pretty impressed with the A54's image quality for the most part. I really had no issues with it. Now, the battery life on the A54 is still really good. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It's got 25-watt charging on here as well. So I really had no issues with the A54, especially at this price point now. I think it's a steal. But again, if you're a gamer, I definitely would look at the other phones on the list. All right, guys, next on the list is the Pixel 6a. This is such a favorite of mine, and you can find this phone for extremely cheap. I'm talking about 150 bucks. It's very, very cheap, and I think it still has the best camera on this list still. So this phone, it does have the aluminum frame. It's got a plastic back, but this phone still feels really solid. It feels premium. There's nothing like really cheap feeling about this phone, and it's IP67 dust and water resistant. This does have the OLED. It's HDR. It's a 6.1 inch display. It's 1080p 429 for the PPI. Again, nothing too crazy about the display. It's overall fine. It is 60 Hz, so it's not really, it doesn't have that really smoothness to it like the 120 Hz phones. But the display is fine. It definitely will get the job done. Now, this phone, it did get the Android 14 update. It running the original Google Tensor chip on here, which is actually fine. It actually is a pretty speedy phone for the most part, even during just little casual gaming. Yeah, you're not going to be able to play at like the really good settings like the OnePlus and the Poco, but this phone still is going to do a pretty good job when it comes to performance, especially with the Android 14 update. I noticed it's just a lot smoother and a lot faster as well. It does have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM, and also you will get updates really fast since it's running stock Android as well. So the speakers on here, I would say this is the best speakers out of the bunch. Really good speakers on the Pixel 6a, a lot of bass, really good clean, balanced sound on here. So that's something that I really appreciated. The optical fingerprint scanner is fine. It works. You just have to put a little bit of pressure on it. But once you get the hang of it, it does work fine. Now, the cameras on here are the highlight with the Pixel. It's got a 12.2 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 4K 60. Then an 8 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080-30. This phone still takes better stills than every phone on this list. It still has really good image processing, skin tones, dynamic range looks really good. I just absolutely love, the cameras on these older Pixel phones. It still is excellent in quality. So if you want something that's really, really cheap, a mid-ranger, whether you get the 6A or the 7A, you're still gonna get, I still think similar quality in terms of pictures. It's just, you can't go wrong with these Pixel phones. So if you on a budget, you want the best stills because you take a lot of pictures, get a Pixel phone, guys. I'm telling you. Video also it's pretty decent on here. It's not anything too crazy, but decent video. But the stills, top notch. So this phone battery life is actually pretty good. It's got a pretty decent sized battery, 4,410 milliamp battery, and then 18-watt charging. Again, no wireless charging on here. Battery definitely lasts all day, so I don't have an issue with battery life. Like I said, excellent phone. Definitely check this one out. All right, guys. Lastly, we got the Galaxy S23 FE. This is a fantastic phone at a really good price, $434. I'm seeing them online on Amazon now. And this is a really good phone. It's very, very close to a flagship, Galaxy S23. Now, this one has the aluminum frame. It's also got the glass back. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It has an overall premium design, so it pretty much feels and looks like a flagship for the most part. Now, this phone does have a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus, 1450 nits peak brightness, so it's pretty bright in direct sunlight. It's 1080p 403 for the PPI. I think the only thing about this phone when I was using it is that I noticed that the bezels were actually a lot bigger than something like the Galaxy S21 FE, and I'm pretty sure Samsung did that just to make a difference between this and the S23, the regular flagship model. But nonetheless, the screen is very nice on here. No issues at all with the display quality. This phone, it did get the Android 14 update. It has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor on here, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 8 gigs of RAM. It's a fantastic phone when it comes to performance in general, and then you get to enjoy all the features of One UI, Samsung desktop support, all that good stuff. And also gaming performance on here is pretty good as well too. I don't really have an issue at all with playing games. Call of Duty, PUBG, all worked extremely well on this phone, so could definitely do a lot of gaming on here. The stereo speakers are really good on here. I really like the quality, very good bass. The fingerprint scanner, it is an optical one, which is fine. For the most part, you just have to apply a little bit of pressure to it. But I think one of the highlights with this phone is actually the cameras. I think this phone takes extremely good pictures. It's got a 15 megapixel standard, and you actually do get a dedicated telephoto lens on here. I think it's the first on the list. It's got an 8 megapixel telephoto with 3 times optical, and then you also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and you can actually shoot in 8K 24. It's got a 10 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. I would say this is the best overall camera system. I still think the Pixel takes better stills, but I would say in general, as far as video, having that telephoto lens and just everything put together makes this, I think, one of the best overall cameras if you're looking for really good pictures and really good video as well too. I think the cameras, the image quality, the selfie, everything is really good on the S23 FE. Also, you do get really good battery life on this phone as well too. It's a 4,500 milliamp hour battery. This does actually have wireless charging, and you do have reverse wireless charging as well. So a lot of these mid-range phones, they did not have it. This one does. So if that's something you really want, definitely consider that. And then you also have 25-watt wire charging. This is a fantastic phone. I wasn't a huge fan when the phone first came out. I thought the price was a little too high for the processor that they put in here. But now that it's come down in price, I think this is an excellent phone to consider. Be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.